Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSPS, Ukraine War. Frontline update for the 29th of June 2024. I'm just in from the garden, spray painting metal, so thought I'd take 20 minutes out to get the Frontline update done before some late night spray painting. What do we have? We have, or if you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the screen at the moment, pause the video. We have quite a lot of movement, and a lot of it, well, it's not looking particularly great for the Ukrainians along the eastern front line mainly. Let's start up in the north in the Kharkiv direction near Vovchansk. We can see that there's no change to the westerly sector of these two, but the one around Vovchansk, there's been some gains that I already told you about in this morning's one. That's now JR, thank you JR for doing the mapping by the way, has updated the gains that the Ukrainians made in pushing the Russians back there. I don't think the Russians ever really had full control over this area. It's just what Cyrillic map said, with the Russians being there at some point. It's probably more likely a grey zone, but there we have it. Like I told you this morning, the Ukrainian army, he says, has re-entered position south of Harahina Street in Vovchansk. Now, it's interesting there because some people, I have heard rumours that F-16s have made strikes over the last 24 hours. It's only really come from one source that a few others have repeated. They are just rumours apparently, and I doubt they are true, but nonetheless, just to let you know, that's out there. This is Raging 545 here, just a Twitter source saying, in the Vovchansk direction, Ukrainian forces continue to have success. One of the more important things to note of the situation here is Ukrainian aircraft are operating more freely with the destruction of most Russian air defences in the area. This is true. So the S-300s and S-400s that were taken out in the Belgorod area back here have been taken out by the Ukrainians. And that has meant that the Ukrainian aircraft have been able to operate much more freely, and they've been hammering this part of Vovchansk and the aggregates plant there with all sorts of, well, mainly the French hammer bombs. That has led people to be quite positive about the situation. It's significant. This could be the first time Ukraine has enjoyed air parity for perhaps even air superiority on any part of the front line. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion and war. There's also been a lot of recent video of the Ukrainian MiG-29 bombing a target in Russia. I wouldn't go nearly so far. We have seen some MiGs release some hammer bombs. We know that the Ukrainians have been hammering this part of the front with their own guided glide bombs, but the Russians have been doing that too, and I wouldn't for a second think that there's parity here or air superiority even. The Russians are still using their planes quite freely, and they are also hammering Ukrainian positions. But it is good to see the Ukrainians having more success with their aviation. That's for sure. Then we come to the northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova down to Crimea, and no activity north, or at least no change to the mapping north of Svatova. So we come down to the area where the Russians have been supposedly gearing up for a big push towards Borova there on the Oskil River. We come down south from there to just south of Makivka, between this Terny-Tulska sector and I guess between Makivka there, and the Russians, according to both deep state maps and Surrey maps, making some fairly substantial gains, really quite wide gains there. That's about 9 kilometers of gains. Not crazy deep, but deep enough, and that is definitely a challenge for the Ukrainians, obviously. I did forget to say, goodness, I forgot to say that the Akhmat and 153rd Tank Regiment have refused orders up in Vovchansk when they found themselves on the front line. So they were supposedly being used as barrier troops, the Akhmat, and now possibly with desertions and Russian losses in that area, have found themselves on the front line and have not liked it. They are often called TikTok warriors, the Akhmat, and they have refused to take orders there. The source saying the assault detachment, he said, in Vovchansk the situation is consistently difficult. The assault detachments of the 153rd Tank Regiment, soldiers of the Akhmat Battalion, refused to participate in the fighting on the front line. You can understand them in your own way. The orders of the command in the style of forward for the motherland, and problems with food supply were superimposed by a high intensity of shelling. I think superimposed is a wrong word there. Being augmented. The Akhmat members were in the reinforcement group, and when the SHO refused to go on the assault, they supported them like brothers. It should be noted that no one fled to the SOCH, don't know what that means. Now the guys are looking for a PES, don't know what that means, in the Vovchansk area. Well, the investigation will be clear. So sounds like all is not well for some of the Russian troops up in that Vovchansk area, is I think what we can take away from there. Now, talking of this Nevska area, on the Luhansk front, says Suriyat maps, the Russian army made wide advances east of Nevska and Novosadove as a result of positional battles with the Ukrainian army. So that is certainly challenging. Then when we come down to the Terny Torska area, just east of Yampelivka, Andrew Perpetua has some small Ukrainian gains again there. There was a claim that they are making continued progress here, the Ukrainians. But also, I had heard that this had been achieved back in April. I reported the other day that someone said it might have been done previously, but some saying as far back as the end of April, where you've got May and June. So 2 months ago, this may have been taken, and it's been kept on the quiet there. I don't know whether that's true, and I don't know why that would be the case as well. But it does appear that they are making further gains as well. So it's just confusing information coming out from here. But good news that the Ukrainians are having some success there, and you would hope bringing forces back down from further up north if the Russians are deeming that as something of a problem. Then when we come down to the Serebryantski forest, here Ukrainian gains have been made according to Deep State Map. The defense forces push back the enemies in the Serebryantski forest. It is tough here. It's tough in the Liman direction. So where we've got Liman's over here, things are pretty hot in this area. According to Deep State Maps, the Ukrainians are making gains. So here's that part of the front line, the Serebryantski forest there. We'll just cycle back through the last few days. So this is the 26th, going on to the 27th, and then 28th. The Russian defensive line is pushed back a little bit. Zoom in there. That's the 28th, 29th. We then have possibly change to the grey zone. I think the understanding that they're pushing on there. So again, positive notes for the Ukrainians there, but it will come, no doubt, at quite a cost. No change to this first front line, but Rozdilivka, just north of Bakhmut and Solidar here, is an area where the Russians are now seemingly in control. A few people saying that Rozdilivka is fully under the Russian control, although Deep State Map and Andrew Perpetua haven't changed their mapping. I expect it might come soon. I'm under the impression that Rozdilivka is certainly exceptionally tough around there. Russians have raised a flag in there previously, and now it's looking more challenging still. Suriyat Map says that the situation on the Eastern Front during the last 3 days, the Russian army managed to capture the remaining parts of Rozdilivka by taking control over the northern and western trenches. So he seems fairly confident that the Russians have pushed on in that area, and it wouldn't surprise me. Then we come to Chaziv Yar, where, as I said this morning, this is just showing you what I'd already told you this morning, that the Russians had taken parts of this forest and parts of the Canal micro-district there, and part of the northern part of the Canal micro-district as well. Now, this is more likely a case of grey zone, going to forest. It's going to be difficult going. I don't know how much mechanised equipment they can get in there, but certainly going to be fairly active. Chaziv Yar is another area that's just, this is a massive war zone. Chaziv Yar, obviously. Chaziv Yar has been pretty much obliterated. It is hammered with Russian artillery and aviation on a consistent basis, and has been for months and months and months. It is horrific around here, but the Ukrainians are doing an incredible job to keep the Russians at bay. Indeed, I'd already shown you that one from this morning, so I haven't got up the tweet talking about that. Then we come on down to the Toretsk area. Now, interestingly, Deep State Maps has pushed the Russians back a bit here, well, not them personally, but the Russians not having control of this field just outside of the east of Pivichne. Whether that's just a rejigging of the lines, I don't know. but certainly a different appraisal to what Surat Maps has the Russians inside the eastern buildings of Pavlichne. But it's further down here around Shumi and going into Zalizne. Now, I heard from Pierre at the moment, who has his own contacts, guy that is a member here, a bit of a legend. I went around Ukraine with him in the back of the battle bus with Greg and Zhenya, and he was pretty damning about the situation in the Toretsk area. So Toretsk and probably New York has just been blocked for volunteers. Only Bronick, their armoured vehicles, are allowed access. We have only one Bronick van that we will be used tomorrow. Everyone just got so used to living near the front line with little consequences in Toretsk, hence the sudden emergency. Lots of cubs and artillery. So artillery and guided glide bombs are hammering Toretsk and Pavlichne and all around here. It's pretty tough there at the moment. Yes, so that is a situation around Toretsk. Let's see what Surat Map says. So the Russian army managed to break through new defences of the Ukrainian army at Pivdene and skirting the landfill, and Terracons penetrated into Pavlichne along the axis until it reached Kaluzka Street. So we're going to look at this area around here. What Surat Maps is talking about is those. So we're now looking to the east around where the Russians, if you look at these purple lines, this is where the Russians were from 2014 onwards, and really up until the white line shows the May the 30th lines. Then if you remember, the Ukrainians had a surprise attack around here and took these hills in this area going towards Orlivka. And then the Russians seem to have just recently done this counterattack that has skirted, as you mentioned, these tailings spoil heaps there of, this is a mining area, so you have some interesting geographical features. That is also a one-to-one rendering through Google Maps. It's not naturally, it looks a bit weird because they've taken the 2D and turned it into 3D, but that's basically what it looks like to all intents and purposes. So yeah, the Russians have made hay while the sun has shone there, taking advantage of some Ukrainian rotations or mistakes or both, and really are pushing, and it's kind of a case of, I guess, piling in where they are sensing, they smell blood there and they're piling in, and Ukrainians really struggling in that particular area, it looks. And then a little bit of movement in the Avdiivka sector with some gains for the Russians towards the T0504 highway. I talked about that this morning, so that was on this morning's update, but there are the pins that reflect that, which I didn't get a chance to do, so thanks JR. Also the same down here in Sokil, where all the mappers agree that the Russians are pushing forward there towards some small villages further to the west. And then further down south, again, some gains for the Russians west of Semenivka on the way to Novoselivka, Persia. But yeah, some gains both for Deep State Maps and Surat Maps in that area. And then, no, we're not there yet. So here we have that last one, last two we've just been talking about. So the Russian army took control, so Surat Maps, over the rest of the locality of Sokil and a third of Yehenivka. In addition, Russian forces made a new advances between Umanska and Novopokrovska, so that's just where we were looking at. So there's Umanska, Novopokrovska, and that's where the Russians are advancing through the fields, and most of Sokil under their control up there as well. So it is really tough on the eastern front line, really, for the Ukrainians still. They are getting weaponry obviously delivered, and artillery ammunition is coming through, but the Russians, like I said, I've said for some time actually, that the Russians really need to take advantage of this period before F-16s get there, and maybe some larger packages that might come from the US, who knows. It's a case of of attacking, striking while the iron's hot. And so that's why I think you're seeing the Russians push everywhere that they can around here. That fits in with exactly what I would expect. While we've got summer months, while you've got warmth and solid grounds, and while, before the Ukrainians can mobilize, and that's what we're seeing. Now, when we come further to the south, Krasnohorivka, like I mentioned, this is one that was already talked about this morning, but the pin's now on a map there to show that the Russians are trying for this pincer movement to take that eastern part of Krasnohorivka, but also further down to the southwest there. The mapping from Andrew Perpetua showing that the Ukrainians have been pushed back a little bit there. The Russians have made some gains. Now, fully, at least according to him, and Surround Maps, controlling all of the urban area of Krasnohorivka. Then when we come slightly further down, we can see a little bit of rejigging. I don't know if that's Ukrainian gains, but I talked about this this morning as well. The Russians having some success there. Let's see if that is... no, there's no talk of that, because that was a mapping that I did this morning. That's just pins being added. Right. Then we have some fairly substantial gains as according to Surround Maps. So let's talk about this. That's Konstantinivka. So on the outskirts of Konstantinivka there. So this is Konstantinivka. This is Novomikhailivka. Let's bring it up there. We have some serious gains north of there, which I talked about this morning, and now it's been filled in, but also some extra ones from this morning's one. So this is actually, this morning, Surround Maps had that on, and I talked about that. Now they've added a bit just south of the reservoir there. The Russian army continues advancing north of Paraskevivka, says Surround Maps. Russian forces began to advance through the southern part of the pond and reach the eastern outskirts of Konstantinivka. Now that is a real challenge for the Ukrainians. Konstantinivka is a key place for them. They really want Konstantinivka. It would give them control over this road coming down to the south to Vuhledar, and is a key for them really taking all of this area. So it's going to be interesting to see how much the Ukrainians put up a fight in Konstantinivka, and how much the Russians are keen on that, and how much they will commit to trying to take that. That is going to be a key battle going forward. You've got Chasiv Yar, you've got Konstantinivka, and then you've got this move towards that highway that I think is concerning as well. I'm not overly concerned about other places, Krasnohorivka and Mariinka. Well, actually, this is a problem going on to Karakova, but they're not there yet. These are the concerns. Right, moving now on to, and I think we have, is this in Robotina? Yeah, so we are going to move along to Robotina now and see that the Russians have made some gains just coming out of the north east of Robotina. I've talked about how this sector has not seen a lot of activity for a good week or two, and now finally the Russians are pushing. A week ago, Russian saying, although it happened a week ago, managed to advance to the northeast of Robotina with the aim of reducing the salient to the east of the locality. During the last few days, here we go, Russian forces began to press from the east with heavy fighting with the Ukrainian army there, as well as some gains here and some heavy fighting over there. So that is happening in Robotina. The Russians seem to be trying to push in all sorts of different places at the moment. Now, finally, we're going to go down to Dnipro River. I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but Surround Maps has the Russian line pushed back a little bit between the Antonivsky Bridge and Kherson, and I don't quite know what that's all about. Obviously seen some video to show that the Russians are not in control of that. It's a grey zone. Maybe a Ukrainian raid has taken place. If we look at Andrew Perpetua's map here, this has been the case for ages, right? This is nothing new, but you've got Ukrainian control coming down the left bank of the Dnipro, the main kind of bank before you get to some of these kind of parts of the delta like the Konka River, and then control over some of these other places going towards the Antonivsky Bridge, which is to say that the Ukrainians do control this area here, arguably, which is fairly close to Oleshki, right? But that's Andrew Perpetua's had that for a long time, right up to where you start, almost getting to the on ramp or the road up to Antonivsky Bridge. So, yeah, interesting that Surat Maps has chosen now to change that. I don't know if there must have been some video that's come out to show that Ukrainians are active there, and that's why he's changed that. So I don't know necessarily that means that there's a push going on at the moment. It could just be footage that they are Ukrainians there, but they've been there for some time, at least according to Andrew Perpetua here. So worthy of note, but might not be anything particularly significant in terms of an incursion across the river or anything like that. So there you go, bit of a mixed bag of nuts. So I say mixed bag of nuts, but actually it's mainly really challenging for the Ukrainians. Their best areas are at the moment north of Kharkiv and in the sort of Serebryantski forest and just north of there as well. Although it will come at a cost, obviously, for the Ukrainians as well. Any kind of counter pressure will be attritional for them. All war is attritional, right? But it's never easy being on the attack when the enemy is well fortified. Yes, so that's me for the day. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. I very much appreciate your support. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.